Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So following Deontay Wilder's defeat to Joseph Parker, I've been thinking in regards to, well, the future of American boxing. And I have to say right now I believe it's looking quite bleak. When we talk about the flagship division of boxing, the heavyweight division, I don't think America right now is looking too promising in regards to upcoming prospects. You have Jared Anderson, who is somewhat talented in my opinion. He's got what I would call raw ability, good athleticism, good speed. But we saw in that Charles Martin fight, there's a hell of a lot to work on. And if you're ready now, if you're anywhere near ready now, as a heavyweight, you're going to go through Charles Martin like a doorway. That's the reality of the situation. Jared Anderson has some talent, but he's quite some way away. Same I would say for Richard Torres. Not quite as talented as Anderson, in my opinion, but still very early in his career. He's got a marketable style, without doubt, but he has so many holes in his game defensively. And we saw in his last fight against Curtis Harper, after he couldn't blast him out in a couple of rounds, he looked a bit rudimentary to me. Same patterns, same combinations, lack of a jab, defensive frailty. And aside from those two, I don't really believe there's anybody in American heavyweight boxing who is a leading light in regards to prospects or even a future champion. And as we know, the heavyweight division is the flagship division in boxing. And, you know, when the Klitschko brothers reigned supreme, many people signalled that as a dark era for heavyweight boxing and boxing in general. I believe American fight fans are going to be saying that again very soon. Not all American fight fans, but the American-centric ones, you know, who believe the only boxing that's worth watching takes place in America. Those types. So in regards to heavyweights, I do feel the landscape looks pretty bleak for US boxing. The difference is, under the Klitschko era, America had fighters that could sell. Even foreign imports like Manny Pacquiao. That era still had fighters who could sell who weren't heavyweights. Obviously Floyd Mayweather, for example. And even lesser than that, you had guys like Barrera, Morales, Marquez, etc., who could do good crowds, who could generate a bit of buzz, albeit on a smaller scale. You had a much more varied landscape of fighters in American boxing, whether they be Americans or Mexican fighters, and obviously in Pacquiao's case, Filipino. But I don't see the current landscape as having those type of names. I don't see this current landscape as having individuals who can really drive the sport forwards through this current period of time. Don't get me wrong, there are some relatively big names like Ryan Garcia, who could be a star. He's got star potential, but ultimately he's not good enough. So that's going to fall flat on its face. You have Tank Davis, who again, he's got the style to be very entertaining. And he does have a fan base, but first and foremost, is Tank Davis the type of fighter to really put himself in harm's way and take those sort of fights on a consistent basis? He's not shown that in his career so far. Yes, he's got a fan base, but not a big enough fan base to really carry his fights on his own. Hence why the likes of Rolly Romero barely cracked 200k. I think Isaac Cruz did less than 200k on pay-per-view. These are not the type of numbers that show Tank is this huge star on his own. If he's in the right fights, like Ryan Garcia, yeah, he can be in big fights, he can generate numbers, but those fights are few and far in between. Maybe Teofimo Lopez, maybe Devin Haney, maybe Shakur, but I doubt these fights do as big a numbers as the Ryan Garcia fight, to be honest. So these guys are names, don't get me wrong. They're names, but do they have the public's imagination like Mayweather did? Like Pacquiao did? No, nowhere close in my opinion. And I can't see them ever garnering that reputation. Terence Crawford's on the way out, was never a star anyway, as is Errol Spence, was never a star anyway. And again, the Terence Crawford-Errol Spence fight encapsulates what's wrong with American boxing and Western boxing in general. It's not just American boxing, I can say the same for the UK. That fight took far too long to make, and once it did happen, it was a mismatch. Spence didn't look like the same guy. That's happened time and time again. And eventually that's going to leave a bad taste in boxing fans' mouths. You can't keep pulling the wool over the consumer's eyes. And the numbers reflect that. I know some smart ass is going to say, what about Ryan Garcia versus Tank? Well, one swallow doesn't make a summer. You know, look at the numbers overall across the board. They are pitifully low, because ultimately boxing fans are getting a second-rate product in America, in particular, in more ways than one. Number one, the fights aren't happening. Number two, the promotion for these events is pretty poor, in my opinion. Number three, the fights that do happen usually leave a bad taste in fight fans' mouths. Even Ryan Garcia versus Tank, by the way. A lot of people weren't happy with the way that fight ended. Many people, including myself, felt Ryan had more to give. And a lot of fans felt that way. Look at Devin Haney versus Lomachenko. A fight that didn't do great on pay-per-view, but it nearly cracked 200k, I believe. Nearly cracked 200k. And it was a good fight, but the result left a bad taste in many fight fans' mouths. Most casuals thought Lomachenko won. And when I say casuals are usually the most accurate scorers of fights from my experience, because they don't really have a dog in the race, nor do they overcomplicate things. Most people felt Lomachenko won. We saw the decision. Then what happens in Devin Haney's next fight? His fight does pitiful on pay-per-view, because that stench is still in the air surrounding that Lomachenko fight. We're being sold something that isn't real. And when something isn't real, people are not inclined to buy it. Not saying Devin Haney's a bad fighter, by the way, just not what he's anointed to be. There's all this hype behind him. The boxing media are pushing him, but the average fight fan isn't buying it. The average fight fan sees him as a guy who got a fluke, got a gift in one of his previous fights. And also, let's be frank, they see him as a boring fighter. Let's be honest here. People don't like to see a blown-up fucking welterweight running away from a blown-up featherweight. People don't like to see that. The era of the Mayweather blueprint is done. It's dead. People have fell out of love with that style. Mayweather caught fire in a bottle. Or lightning in a bottle, should I say. He caught lightning in a bottle. His marketing was very good. He selected the right opponents, usually of Hispanic background. He talked a gang of shit. People wanted to see him lose, and he sold. But that's out the window. It's done now. The whole slick style is dead at the box office. It's dead, and it's been dead for a while. It's been dead for a while, as we've seen from Devin Haney. Shakur's not been on pay-per-view yet. Nobody wants to buy these guys' fights, and nor should they. Nor should they. So where's the next star coming from in American boxing? You've got a good fight. I'm not saying you haven't got... America doesn't have good fighters, because they clearly do. You've got exciting fighters as well, like Jaron Ennis, for example. Where's that guy's promotion been, by the way? A guy with power in both hands, speed, combinations, fluid style, good to watch. The guy's been on the come-up, and sometimes he's been fighting once or twice a year. Where are the stars coming from in American boxing? Again, I'm not saying there's a lack of quality per se in American boxing, although things have been a lot better. There's still good fighters in America, but the level of promotion is poor, and in many ways fraudulent, because certain guys they are pushing just aren't going to appeal anymore. That ship's sailed. When it comes to Devin and Shakur, that ship's long gone. And the guys who could be exciting, like Tank, aren't taking the fights. You know? Like Tank versus Teo, I'm sure would do well. Is that fight going to happen? More than likely not. And if it does, it's going to be a long time from now. These type of fights need to happen on a regular occurrence to keep the boxing ecosystem alive and to make it thrive, to attract new fans to the sport, you know, to garner a new audience. These sort of fights need to happen on a far more regular basis, and when they do, let's not have a fraudulent outcome. Because even in pay-per-view fights that have done well in recent times, none of them have gone down well. The only exception may be Golovkin-Canelo 2 and maybe the second and third Wilder Fury fights. They went down pretty well, I would say. But like the first Golovkin-Canelo fight, horrible decision on the biggest stage of all. Once again, dragging the sport of boxing through the mud. The third Golovkin-Canelo fight, just a pure cash grab, awful. Obviously, Manny versus Floyd went down like a lead balloon. You know, the vast majority of pay-per-views in recent times have left a bad taste in boxing fans' mouths. Ward Kovalev, need I say more? You know? It feels like every single time we're getting a fraudulent product, a half-baked product, or something that's not worth being on pay-per-view in the first place, and fights that happen too late. And I can't see any signs that it changes in American boxing. You also have Canelo Alvarez retiring, who I think's been a problem as well, by the way. He's actually been the only guy who's generated those sort of numbers, but once again, at what cost? And once he does retire, I don't see anybody being able to generate those sort of numbers on a consistent basis in boxing in America. Yes, there's going to be the one-off fight here and there, but like I said, a swallow doesn't make a summer. I think the boxing ecosystem, the boxing financial bubble will soon start to pay for the terrible product that they've given fight fans, the awful treatment and disdain that they've treated fight fans with. The chickens will come home to roost in the next few years. Now, some may say I'm being negative, some may say I'm being hyperbolic in my statements, but and there are fights to make, by the way. There are some great fights to make, and if these fights are made in quick succession, yeah, I'm sure boxing's gonna have a massive shot in the arm, and it's gonna help out a lot, obviously. But what gives you the faith? I'll ask you, what gives you the faith? For those who are saying I'm being negative, what gives you the faith? What gives you the belief that these fights are going to be made in good time and when they should be made? Because we haven't had that on a consistent basis for a number of years now. And also, what gives you the faith that these fights are going to deliver? Boxing's been a sport, from a global perspective, it's delivered a lot in recent times. But if we're looking at the West in particular, especially America, because for Western boxing, America is the hub. When you look at America, American boxing hasn't delivered. And it hasn't delivered for a number of years. That's a reality. And people can cope all they want. They know it's a weak era in regards to fights being made. They know boxing is slipping down the totem pole of popularity, despite the odd fight doing well here and there. They know. I mean, look at socials on a fight night, particularly when it clashes with a big UFC event. Look at the difference in social media interactions. It's night and day when you compare it to the UFC. It's like when Canelo fought Kovalev in this historic fight, is what they labelled it. Yeah, Kovalev and Canelo had to wait for two UFC journeymen to fight before they stepped in the ring. That was when Masvidal fought Nate Diaz. Two UFC essential journeymen. But that was a bigger fight. Yeah, boxing's in a great place. Okay, cope. That's all that is cope. Something needs to change. The custodians of boxing, whether it be Top Rank, Al Heyman, Eddie Hearn, etc., they definitely need to address the ongoing issue before it gets even worse. But anyway, Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy. Peace.